Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Steve Bhaerman is an internationally known author, humorist, and workshop leader. He has written and performed as Swami Beyondananda. I love that. The cosmic comic. Swami's comedy has been called irreverently uplifting and has been described both as comedy disguised as wisdom and wisdom disguised as comedy. His latest book was written with cellular biologist Bruce H. Lipton, PhD, is Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future, and a Way to Get It There from Here, from Hay House. So welcome to the show, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Bernard. Great to be here wherever we are, which seems to be everywhere. And
Yes.
Thank you for the lovely pronunciation of Beyondananda. It's kind of an Italian name. It rolls right off the tongue.
Yes, it does. It certainly does.
I think it's dripping on the floor. It just ran down the... Okay, but yeah, thank you. You pronounced it quite well.
It took me a few tries. I had to practice that one, but... Anyway, so Steve, I find as I was researching and trying to get the show together and try to come up with some form of an outline for today's broadcast and your visit here with us today, I have found you're doing a lot of things. You do everything from comedy, you do a lot of things with consciousness, you do workshops, you're an author. So I really appreciate the fact that you're touching on so many tangents on what I consider to be very important topics in today's day and age and where we're at historically speaking. So with that, let me ask you, what kind of brought you to doing everything that you're doing? Was there a protagonist or something that got you going? What was it for you?
You know, as a kid, growing up, I spent my deformative years in Brooklyn, New York, and there was something about growing up there that cultivated the sense of humor, and I was the class comedian. I was the kid that disrupted class with a joke and so on. And the way you know that you're chosen for this is the first time you're in the lunchroom and you make another kid laugh so hard that milk comes out of their nose. That's a sign from God.
Yes.
You know, and then, of course, I pursued serious pursuits. I got involved with education. I started an alternative high school in Washington, D.C., wrote a book about that called No Particular Place to Go, Making of a Free High School. I was teaching auto workers at Wayne State University in Detroit, and then a funny thing happened. And, you know, a lot of times people say, a funny thing happened. Maybe it's not that funny. Maybe it's just kind of an out-of-left-field thing. And what happened was I got laid off from my job. They had tenured professors they had to place, and so the only job I could get at that point was for the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan, doing tree work, taking down trees that had Dutch elm disease. And while I was in the course of doing this, another funny thing happened, and that is I met a fellow worker who recognized that I had some skill as a writer and as a comedian, and he said, let's start a little newspaper for the guys at the shop, which is what we did, and that totally changed the course of my life. I recognized that humor was a way to allow new ideas to come in under the radar. It was a way of disrupting the ordinary in a good and playful way. And I recognized that I had the skills to do that. And then a few years later, I also, with a friend, started a pioneering publication, one of the first holistic publications in Ann Arbor, Michigan, called Pathways Magazine. And we recognized that people needed humor to balance out the seriousness of their spirituality. And so the character Swami Beyondananda came to me. I like to say I was struck by enlightening during a brainstorm. And, since the late 80s, I have been traveling and performing comedy in the guise of Swami Beyondananda. One more thing. Meanwhile, I've always had an interest in politics. My background is in political science, although I have to confess, I never actually got to dissect a politician in poli-sci lab. Never quite got that far. But I met Bruce Lipton about 11 years ago, and we began a conversation based on his brilliant book, Biology of Belief, how our beliefs and perceptions and feelings and thoughts and programming impact how our lives play out. And Spontaneous Evolution is a book that I wrote with Bruce, which applies those ideas to our collective beliefs and how we ended up where we are now, and which really is on the threshold of an evolution, based on the beliefs that we've accepted as true until now, and what seems to be going on. I'm calling it an evolutionary upwising, as people are waking up and wising up to the greater truths. What's happening right now is this burgeoning awareness that we are all in it together, that we are all cells in a unified body called humanity. And as humanity thrives, so we individually thrive and get to express ourselves. So that seems to be where I am at these days. And humor is a phenomenal tool for shaking up old ideas, allowing new ideas to come in, sparking our creativity and sparking the heart of who we are, hearty laughter and the heart.
Absolutely, and I can't help but think of other comedians that were teaching us a lesson during their comedy. Someone like George Carlin or Bill Hicks. These people that were really talking about very serious issues and help us digest the seriousness of what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, George Carlin was certainly a genius, and his work tended to be rather edgy and sometimes cynical, and proved that you can say things in the language of comedy that cannot be said anywhere else. Jon Stewart proved that over his tenure at The Daily Show.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, Bill Maher, all of these people who are telling inconvenient truths through the language of humor. In fact, my wife Trudy and I lived in Texas for 8 years, and we once did a performance in Texas, and one of the Texans came up to us after the show, and he said to me, he said, you tell people what they don't want to hear in a way that they want to hear it. And I think that transformational comedy has that power to educate us, not just intellectually, but also spiritually. And I think that while George Carlin and many of the great comedians who are iconoclasts who needed to bust these idols and use humor as a weapon of mass deconstruction, what is now required is reconstruction, is not just leaving people with a laugh, but leaving them with a smile, leaving them encouraged, leaving them with the energy to make changes. And when there's so much energy about what we don't want, that sustains us through a very, very short period of time where we get very excited, but it's not sustainable over the long run. And so if comedy actually provides a healing and soothing aspect as well, saying convenient truths about we're all in this together, or using terms like the great upwising, using terms like the heartland security and these other memes that indicate much more where we want to go than where we don't want to go.
That's a very, very strong point. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And as far as spirituality, we spoke a little bit before the show, and I was telling you how we always have all these, very well-known, famous, serious, luminaries and speakers and authors, everyone from Rupert Sheldrake to we were lucky enough to have John Trudell on a few years ago. But it's been very serious, and I can't help but wonder why those of us on the spiritual path, whether it be through spiritual media or even just our personal spiritual path, we take it so seriously, and we forget that we're allowed to laugh about it. Do you find that to be true? And if it is true, why do we need to laugh while we're on a spiritual path?
Well, there's a famous cartoon. There's a clown laying on a psychiatrist's couch, and his complaint is, "Nobody takes me seriously." And and in a certain regard, that is the secret sauce of humor, because it is not taken seriously. Just as in the old days, the court jester was allowed to say things to the king that nobody else could say. In the Native American tradition, this is something that's really worth taking a look at. The Heyoki, the sacred clowns,
Yeah.
have a certain kind of power and influence that trumps everything. Jokers are always wild. And a wonderful native teacher, Brooke Medicine Eagle, told this story several years ago. And she was at this festival at the square in Santa Fe, and there is an elder Native American woman who's just so proper and so elegant. And she's dressed in turquoise and leather and just beautiful. And in the gutters and the streets are these heyoki, these clowns, and they're smashing watermelons. And one of them comes up to her with all of these watermelon innards and rubs it all over her beautiful outfit. And there's kind of a collective gasp from everybody there. And then the woman burst out laughing in recognition that in life, just as the Tibetan sand painters will just, once they're done with their work of art, they'll go and they'll
Yep.
blow it all apart. The impermanence of the structures that we take so seriously, including spiritual structures, which are really ways of trying to get in touch with the ineffable, that which cannot be spoken, and we try to find words to speak about that which cannot be spoken. And so when you have this totally playfully, mischievously destructive force, like smearing watermelon innards on an elegant woman, it reminds us all that these structures that we take so seriously are really just temporary in terms of what really is enduring. And because we live in a mental society, there are pre-intellectual intelligences that are instinctual, and there are post-intellectual intelligences which enable us to experience synchronicities, enable us to communicate with our own soul, and so on. And many of these they're beyond the linear and even the advanced powers of the intellect. So, because we live in such an intellectual world, these spiritual experiences, many of which have no words, we've had to find a word to describe them. And just as chanting or silence or meditation are ways of getting in touch with the world beyond language and beyond the intellect, humor is a reminder that immediately creates an even playing field. And in the laughter, when we laugh, what happens is laughter causes breathing. And as we all know, breathing is the key to long life, right? We breathe
Hmm.
in, we inspire, we don't, we expire. And so it's really important when we begin breathing, what happens is more oxygen goes to the brain. And if we happen to be in a state of anxiety or fear, it takes us out of fight or flight, puts us into where more synapses are synapsing in our brain, and gives us tremendously more resources for creativity and problem solving. And so when we access this humor, it puts us in our hearts. It gives us oxygen for our brains, It expands our ideas about what's possible. It makes us more flexible, makes us more creative, and actually makes us more intelligent.
Oh yes, yes, and I can agree with everything you just said. I feel that it does. It changes. It transforms our body. There is a certain healing that goes on as far as physically and emotionally, and we seem to forget that. And I love the work that you're doing to not only to remind us of that, but to actually experience that. With that, can you tell us a bit about Swami Steve, his performances? What kind of guy is he? Is he?
He's a fun guy, even though he's not a mushroom. Swami Beyondananda he's kind of a larger than life character or caricature. Again, when you have a character, the character has greater flexibility than you do. The Swami he's a punster. I studied in the Punjab and I learned a language of wordplay which is called Punjabber. So the Swami plays with words. He shifts reality, and the it's really great because people think that they're in one world and they're in the other. Something that Swami started doing recently. He'll uh, he'll introduce himself to an audience and then he'll say, "Okay, how many people believe that they were predestined to be here today?" Now, of course, people will raise their hand. This is a
Right.
spiritual audience. I say, "Okay, let me put it a different way. Who bought advance tickets?" Like that. You know. So again, it's shifting context. It's taking a familiar context and connecting it with an unfamiliar context.
I love it. I love it. Are you still performing these days? How
Oh
is?
yeah, we just did a big show in Santa Cruz over the weekend. It was a benefit for the Bernie Sanders campaign. You mentioned that earlier.
Wonderful.
Called March 4th for Bernie. It was on March 4th. This weekend, I will be doing a benefit for I get paid for these benefits, so just so you know, it is my day job.
Excellent.
For the Center for Spiritual Living in Ukiah, California. And of course, we all know Ukiah spelled backwards is haiku. And then the weekend after next, I'll be doing my biannual show in Ashland, Oregon. Um, and if you go to my website, wakeuplaughing.com, and go to Swami's calendar, you'll see all of those events are up there. Um, Later on in the spring, we'll be in Southern California. We'll be in Oregon and points north later on in the summer. And in the fall, we have an East Coast tour scheduled and a couple of conferences back here on the West Coast. So I do love performing. I also am doing a class starting in April for the Shift Network, and it's called Laughter Medicine. And what's really fun about this class is there's no homework. It's basically total 90-minute immersion in humor in the midst of everybody else's serious pursuits. As you had talked about this earlier, it's a way to offer perspective and counterbalance to the seriousness that we find ourselves in. And I think that there are people who I may have been one of these people because I used humor growing up as a kid in New York as both a weapon and a shield. And
Mhm.
sometimes people use humor to guard against intimacy. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about using humor as a gateway to self-understanding, what we call, in this class, we talk about what I call self-facing laughter. And when we wholeheartedly and lovingly laugh with God in our own face, what we're doing is we're laughing in the face of our ego, we're laughing in the face of our challenges, and we're taking, if not life-threatening situations, certainly laugh-threatening situations, and giving ourselves perspective and actually providing greater resource and greater physiological resource to help us through these challenging passages.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. And speaking of passages that we're going through, what is your I guess experience and or feeling on this idea that humanity is going through some type of awakening, that we are you mentioned a little bit earlier, but so many have kind of turned this into, well, a prophecy. It's been called a prophecy that the humanity would awaken. Some people are calling it Armageddon. Some people are calling it the apocalypse. Some people are calling it the beginning of the golden age. What's your take on all of this? Where are we? Where are we headed?
Well, I love the term apocalypse because what it really means is the lifting of the veils.
Yes, yes.
And what's happening now is the veils are being lifted simultaneously, both on the awful truths and the awesome opportunities. We're seeing revelations about our own government. We're seeing revelations about horrific things that have been done, child abuse scandals in the church, human trafficking in this country, where it's shocking what's going on. And people don't want to look at these things because they're just too uncomfortable. They're too unpleasant. However, with the context of love, through the context of loving coherence, of knowing who we really are at the heart, that at the heart of everything, we are love, then we're able to metabolize these toxins and be able to gather around the virtues and values that the vast majority of us have in common. At the root of every spiritual and ethical path is some version of the golden rule. And in spontaneous evolution, I believe we have a dozen of these from different spiritual paths listed. The other thing that, coming from Bruce Lipton's background as a cellular and evolutionary biologist, is that every phase of evolution involves expanded awareness and expanded community. And so in looking at the fractal repeating patterns of evolution, the next phase of human evolution is recognizing that we're all cells in a superorganism called humanity. And once we recognize that, we see that so many of the forms that we've bought into, thanks to rule by the lowest common denominator for 5,000 years, have led us to warfare. Our country spends 59% of its budget on war.
Yeah.
And also toxic forms of communication where people are working against one another rather than working together. Once we begin to recognize ourselves as an organism where the health of the whole and the health and fulfillment of each individual unique human cellular soul is all intertwined, once we begin to recognize that, then we see that much of what we've been doing is really autoimmune dysfunction. And at a time when we do need to mobilize our resources to use our intelligence more intelligently, to really overgrow many of the problems that have been caused by a you or me worldview. This is where this election campaign is really very interesting, because the Donald Trumpism, it represents the last gasp of the old patriarchy.
Yeah.
We need somebody strong to protect us against those other bad people. And it's like a cleanse that's happening, like a disease process that is close to its end, where it's flaring up, going, please don't kill me, please don't kill me. And that's where Trumpism is coming from. It represents perhaps 25 or 30% of our adult population, but it's not where the world is going. The Bernie Sanders campaign, and again, it's not really about Bernie as an individual.
Right.
It's really about him as being a stand for the we distribution of wealth and the we distribution of power, away from the elites, more toward cultivating a voice and a vote for ordinary human beings who are more collectively wise than even the greatest experts, as many studies have shown us. So the point is that what may be happening right now, and again, I don't think anything is necessarily written, what may be happening right now is an awakening to the possibilities of who we've imagined that we can be collectively, the using our resources together in order to create this world and get us through this very narrow passage of climate change, ecological disaster, economic falling apart, et cetera, and really put us in a in a world where we can actually pass it along to the young people. That's why the Bernie movement is a movement of young people.
Wonderful. Steve, we've got a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I am Bernard Alvarez, and we are speaking with Steve Bhaerman, a.k.a. Swami Steve. And you can find more information about our guest at wakeuplaughing.com. Welcome back to the show, Steve. And I really appreciate what you were talking about just before the break. Excuse me. I was wondering if we could speak to Swami and ask him a few things about the this election cycle.
Sure, we can put Swami Beyondananda on right now. He's hovering above, and I'll put him right by the microphone.
Oh, great!
You can ask him anything. Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you. So welcome to the show, Swami. We're very happy you're here.
Well, it's great to be here. And guess what? We have no choice because no matter where we are always here.
Yes, we are, aren't we? And speaking of here we are in another political election cycle in the United States. So what do you think about the election cycle so far?
Well, we have a deeply divided body politic in this country. Half the population believes our elections are broken, and the other half believes that they're fixed, you see.
Yes.
and you know, we have been divided into these two tribes, divide and conquer. It has been used for many centuries. We've been divided into red tribe Republicans, blue tribe Democrats, spending all of their energy arguing about whether it is worse to kill the born or the unborn. And meanwhile, the Commonwealth has been stolen by a very, very, very small percentage of the uncommonly wealthy. And so beyond these elections, we need to bring left and right, front and center. We need to bring red tribe and blue tribe together in sacred circles.
Yes.
To talk until they are purple in the face.
Yes.
Because only by being together as one purple people will the peeps outnumber the perps.
Yes. Isn't that the truth? And speaking of the perps, what do you think of this wonderful movement here with Donald Trump? He's quite a character.
Well, you know, I was, you know, there's been a lot of talk of the end times, you know, and really a few years ago, there was actually somebody came to me who was disappointed because the rapture didn't happen.
Yes.
I said, hey, come on, cheer up. It's not the end of the world. But actually, during last fall, I went and looked up the phrase in the Bible, and you won't believe what it says. It says, a sign that the end times are near is the final trump shall blow. Now, many people are going, yes, we all know that Trump blows. And it's very important that we recognize that at this point in our human history, we, humanity, the collective 7 billion of us, we are in the role of the hero in the greatest movie ever made. You know, it's the greatest reality TV show ever. It's called Reality.
Yes.
And what happens is when you're in the hero's journey, when you're part of this great story, there does have to be a worthy adversary. And Donald Trump is that adversary. He represents everything that we don't want. He represents the individual ruled by ego. He represents top-down arbitrary power. He represents, if you don't like people, keep them out. He represents lie, cheat, and steal to get anywhere. And just keep lying and keep cheating and keep stealing. Now, we have to have compassion. We have to have compassion because behind every soulless heel is an unhealed soul. And so I'm doing my blessing program to bring all of these people into this new paradigm. I am calling it from a-hole to b-hole.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And so On the other side, we have a lot of talk. We have Hillary Clinton. We have Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders seems to have a message that might resonate with the awakening of humanity. Do you think he's a part of the awakening?
Well, I think the Bernie movement is bigger than Bernie, and
Yes.
it's going to grow no matter what. It's going to be a people's upwising where we wake up to how we have been divided and conquered. We wise up to the old game and we rise up to a new game. And this new game is the game of what Buckminster Fuller called the world game, the we're all in this together game. And it's the game that is worth playing right now that will allow us to survive and create thrival for all. So Bernie is the placeholder. 80% of his support is coming from young people who are registering to vote maybe for the first time.
Yes.
And so this movement, whether or not he wins the nomination, is going to shift politics in this country. Everybody is talking about the Trump movement because it's more interesting, and it serves the mainstream corporate media to talk about that more, to create more fear, to create more misunderstanding. Truly, the real movement is the Bernie movement. That is the one that's growing, 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 growing. It encompasses the young people and the people who are going to be on the planet for the next 50, 60, 70, 80, or 100 years.
Yes. Yes, very true, very true. And on a separate note, Swami, what are what's your advice for those of us on spiritual path that want to achieve enlightenment? How do we achieve enlightenment?
Well, first of all, enlightenment can strike at any time. But my way of doing it, you see, my spiritual path, I called it fundamentalism with the accent on the fun, which is not to be confused with fundamentalism, accent on the mental.
Yes.
And what this involves, it involves laughing. It involves humor. It involves actually levity to help us rise above whatever has been bringing us down. From the higher perspective of levity, we can see that life is a joke, but God is laughing with us, not at us.
Right.
And of course, the creator is watching the comedy channel we're with on. So once you get that perspective, then you can laugh lovingly with the creator at our own silly selves, have a moment of what is called full realization, and then be able to share that loving, joyful energy with other people around you. It's kind of like loaves and fishes. One person can enter a room with a smile, and hundreds of people can leave with it. And this is proliferating and proliferating outwardly in a ripple effect.
Yes, yes, very true, very true. Thank you. And one last question, Swami Beyondananda.
I love that. Say that again. Beyondananda.
Beyondananda.
Yeah.
If you knew the world was listening to this broadcast, every single person on the world was listening, what would you tell everybody if they were listening?
Well, that's a big, big, big question. Well, first of all, I would say that we have a choice every moment whether we choose love or fear. This is really the choice, moment to moment to moment to moment. There's that famous story about the Native American grandfather who says, I have two wolves inside of me fighting. One is the wolf of love and connection. The other is the wolf of fear and anger. And the grandchild says, which one will win? And the grandfather says, whichever one I feed. And so we have to recognize that fear, acknowledge that love is more powerful than fear. Otherwise, we would be singing, all you need is fear.
Yes.
She fears you, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, we're not singing that. And that is a very, very good thing. So one of the great realizations that we have as part of this upwising is that even if we cannot choose our circumstances, we can actually choose how we respond to those circumstances, and we get a chance to choose again and again and again. And when a critical mass of the heretofore uncritical masses choose love and connection, there will be an actual change, a palpable change, where we recognize that humanity has a new mission statement, which is every one of our 7 billion human cells letting their light completely shine. And the enlightened ones call this fulfillment.
Ah, very good, very good. Well, thank you so much, Swami Beyondananda. We were hoping we could speak to Mr. Steve Bhaerman now. Is he around?
Oh, yeah, here I am. Here I
Oh,
am. Yeah, the Swami he is so good about vacating. Swami actually transcended his ego using a very simple three-word mantra. Want to learn it?
yes, I was going to ask you about mantras.
Okay, the mantra to transcend the ego, egoing, egon. Just like
Ah, beautiful. I have to remember that one. I'm writing that down.
that. Works almost as good as mental floss. So anyway.
Egoing Egon. Wonderful. Steve, you wrote a book with Bruce Lipton called Spontaneous Human Evolution, and that the title alone is inspiring for me as someone who sees this transformation happening within myself and with so many people in my life and around the world that I'm in contact with. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, how it came about, and its core message?
Well, it began with a conversation that Bruce and I had about how to take the ideas from biology of belief, that our beliefs and perceptions and programming um, really greatly influence the outpicturing of our lives and so on, our reality. And we decided, what if we applied that to our collective beliefs? And so we have three sections of the book. The first section is called "What If Everything You Know Is Wrong?" And we talk about how there have been a number of dominant paradigms in recorded human history and how these paradigms have evolved. And we're on the threshold of a new evolution from scientific materialism, which is essentially deifying atheism, saying only the material world is real, to something that includes and transcends both science, both physical world and the non-physical world. So we talk about what we call four myth perceptions, MYTH, and these are four beliefs that the religion of science holds as theology, dogma, that have been disproved, that's actually been inconveniently disproved by science. And those are number one, only the material world is real. Einstein said that the field is the sole governing factor over the particle. The second one is survival of the fittest. Actually, it's thrival of the fittingest. That which fits into the environment is what thrives. The third is that evolution is that our genes are our destiny. You know, that we are genetically programmed, and there's nothing we can do about that. And the fourth is that evolution is a random process. And while there are random aspects to evolution, it is an intelligent process of life learning about itself and moving itself forward. Then in the third section of the book, Regrowing the Garden, we talk about how these new paradigm ideas inform our new world and how these are the ideas that we can now begin to live into, even if they're not represented out there by the mainstream media, which is still a tool of the old paradigm. Yeah. What you're doing, obviously, is helping to move this paradigm forward by presenting these outside the box ideas to the point where as more and more and more people begin to work with them, understand them, they become more real and they become the reality that we live into.
It sounds wonderful, and I'm going to have to go buy a copy of that book now, aren't I?
Yeah, it's a great book, and there's also a 5 CD set, audio set that Sounds True has produced.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Now you're speaking. You had mentioned the new paradigm, and I talk about the new paradigm all the time. And the argument with that is, okay, well, we've visualized this new paradigm. We see the how should we say the end point, the outcome of what we're looking for, but how do we get there? Is there a time frame? Are there certain steps to be taken? Do we need to continue to expose what's wrong with this paradigm in order to move into the new paradigm? How do you see the new paradigm? What is the new paradigm for you?
Well, I think all of those things are true. I mean, part of the uprising and the apocalypse is lifting the veil simultaneously
Hmm.
over the things that have to be metabolized. Now, I just saw Michael Moore's excellent new movie, Who Do We Invade Next, or
Oh,
Where
I
Do We
want to
Invade
see
Next?
that.
And one of the things that it begs the question, how did we get so stupid?
Yes.
And I think the way that we got stupid in this country is through the perpetrations of our empire. From the end of World War II, where we incorporated Nazi scientists, to the Kennedy assassination, the King assassination, to Iran-Contra, to 9/11, and to all of the other perpetrations that we cannot speak about. So just as surely as those young people who are impacted by pedophile priests in such a way where they were told that they will be punished in hell eternally if they say anything, and their parents will go to hell, using all of the power of the authority of the church to protect and to oppress. It's very important that these things come out, because the reason why we haven't been able to use our full intelligence, the reason why the political party that we've counted on to balance out the excesses of capitalism, the Democratic Party, has been ineffective. It's because it has been unwilling and unable to address the perpetrations of the American empire.
Yeah.
And so through these hidden secrets, it's created a tremendous sense of disheartenment, and also the American people not really knowing what they can believe. And so people, there's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that may have partial truths, but are easily disprovable.
Yeah.
And so the reason why so many people are following Donald Trump, it's because they are looking for certainty. It's just the wrong certainty that they're looking for.
That's certainly true. And I can't help but wonder, as we're talking about the new paradigm and spirituality, you had just mentioned about the church, so it's got me thinking. In the new paradigm, will organized religion have a place in that? Will we see a change in how organized religion carries itself to better align with this new consciousness that seems to be coming about?
Well, the Swami says, and certainly looking at Pope Francis, well, you can't teach an old dogma new tricks. But I think that what's happening is that there is a new sensibility emerging, and it's typified by a brilliant book by Michael Dowd called Thank God for Evolution. And Michael is an evangelical Christian. His wife is an atheist scientist. And when he gives talks, he gives the exact same talk to fundamentalist Christians, to atheist scientists, to New Agers, to integral philosophers, and everybody stands up and cheers, because the message takes us beyond both religion and non-religion to virtues and values that humanity has in common. And because we have been conveniently separated, we've been, divide and conquer has been used, as some wise person once said, spirituality is our connection with the divine, and religion is crowd control.
Yeah.
One of the great things that one of the ways that we've limited ourselves is that we've fought over the various particulars. Alan Watts, the great philosopher, said, instead of worshiping the finger, let's notice where the finger is pointing. And all fingers point toward some version of the golden rule, some version of treat other people well, some version of we're all in this together. And that is the operating system for humanity. Now, many people go, well, that sounds utopian. Bucky Fuller, one of his last books was called Utopia or Oblivion. And he laid it out that given the way things are unfolding right now, if we don't choose heaven, then hell will be chosen for us. And that the ideal needs to become the real deal. It's not that we would be living in a perfect world. We'd just be living in a world where we'd be dealing with better problems.
Yeah. I like that idea, dealing with better problems.
Yeah. Think about it. Instead of, dealing with the problems of survival, we would be dealing with the problems of choosing how best to thrive. One of Swami's jokes is, okay, I'm going to stretch your imagination. Imagine going to the voting booth and voting for the greater of two goods.
Yes.
Well, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Swami, you're proposing a sane world. You must be crazy. And so what we're really talking about is going sane. We're talking about what does sanity look like. Again, there's a chapter in Spontaneous Evolution called Going Sane. And as Eric Fromm wrote in The Sane Society, sanity is not something it's not the same as normal. What was normal in Nazi Germany was not sane. What's normal in our so-called civilization is not sane. The word sanity comes from the same root as sanity, as sanitary, sanitarium. It's sanus, it means health. Mm-hmm. So for something to be sane, there has to be a basic vibration of health, love, and coherence to it.
Here, absolutely. We're running out of time here. We got about another 90 seconds, but
oh my God! But we're going to get a new shipment tomorrow, aren't we?
Yeah. Ever so quickly, does spirituality and politics have a place in each other's world?
Well, I think that our biggest problem is politics without spirituality, where there hasn't been a collectively understood transcendent sacred at the center. So consequently, the power of money has, human nature abhors a moral vacuum. So into that moral vacuum has flowed the power of money, and we don't know what to do about it. But what we do about it is the missing sacred. What are the virtues and values that the 90% of us who aren't sociopaths have in common? And creating a new political authority, not even a top-down authority, but a bottom-up understanding from that awareness of what the true sacred is. Some version of the golden rule is the only way we can overrule the rule of gold.
Yeah. Here. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today. Steve, your website is wakeuplaughing.com. Are there any other websites that we should point out?
Well, wakeuplaughing.com is the best way to find me. I'm also on Facebook as Steve Bhaerman, Bhaerman, Swami Beyondananda, it's spelled beyond, and then Ananda. Go to Wake Up Laughing, send me an email, join our mailing list, and you could also get Swami's Daily Laxative, which is humor in your inbox 5 days a week.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, we will see you all next week here, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We love you very